Hello there, my name's Alexander White, and each week I'm bringing you music production tips and techniques for musicians, home studio producers, and anyone looking to refine their music production skills. And this week I had a request on the YouTube channel to do a video similar to the last video I created, but actually about one of the channel strips that comes with the Luna Pro bundle. And I thought that was a wonderful idea because not only, of course, will it help anyone who's just maybe got hold of Luna Pro and would like to know a bit more about the channel strip that comes with it, but this is also a great example of how last week we used an SSL 4KB, and this week we're going to use an API channel strip, the API Vision channel strip in particular. And this shows how you can just mix with both and both get amazing results. One is not better than the other. They will be different because you will make different decisions. So the comment was, please make a video like this, but with the channel strip that's included in the Luna Pro bundle. First of all, what I'll do is I'll show you all the controls of the API Vision channel strip, and then I'll give you a little demo of it actually working on a track. The track we're going to use, I'll play you a little bit of, which is the same track we used on the last video, and it's kind of a light, summery, chilled out kind of a thing. So it's got a few different musical parts that we can have a little play around with. First of all, let me play you the track. First of all, let's load up the API Vision channel strip on the tracks that we're working with. And it's the kick, the snare, tom 1, tom 2, overheads, tambourine, bass, ukulele, and 2 electric guitars. And here we have it. Now, this one looks quite busy. There's quite a lot of functionality on here. So let me just take you through it so you can see what's going on. What we have is these are, you can see they are little components of the channel strip. A bit like 500 series modules for your 500 series chassis. You can see they're separated. You've got this 212L, 215L, and so on. And they are the sections of this channel strip. So let's start up here. First of all, what we have is the mic pre. So this gives you two options. The line gain, which simply adjusts the volume that's coming into the channel strip. So let's say, for example, you were setting the threshold on your compressor. If you turn this up, you'll find you start triggering your compressor earlier. And so you won't need to dig in as much threshold-wise to start to see gain reduction. So this is really helpful if you've got a particularly quiet source and you need to bring it up in level. Then you can compress it, and then you can compensate at the end with the main fader. But you also have this mic gain here. Now this simply emulates the actual mic preamp, and what this is good for is distorting the channel strip a little bit, giving a little bit of character because it goes through all of the emulated circuitry of the mic preamp gain. Whilst the line also does this, the line is simply a cleaner gain. You will have your VU meter here, so you can see how loud you're coming into the channel strip, and then this one is how loud you are coming out of the channel strip. Here we have the selection. The input control just simply selects between mic and line, but you can see you can simply click on these controls here. Then we also have a phase or a polarity invert to flip the polarity. Pad, so you can reduce the volume coming into the channel strip below line gain. Let's say you have a really hot signal and your line gain is already low. You can hit pad and it'll bring it down even more. And then a little fixed high pass filter. Next, we go into the 215L, and the 215L is your high pass and low pass filters. Now you can switch this on and off, which makes it really easy to A/B, and you simply high pass, you just raise it to cut more of the low end off and turn this down to cut more of the high end off. What sidechain does is it stops you being audibly able to hear this cutting either at the top or the bottom, but allows the compressor to hear it. So you could turn the high pass filter on, roll up to say 600 Hertz, leaving only quite a bright signal because you're not really going to have anything in the low end, and then use the compressor, and the compressor will only hear the high end. That can be a really great thing if you've got very bass heavy content and you just want to control the volume of the higher end stuff. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't work on the low end. The compressor will be compressing everything, but it's only listening to the high end, which can be very useful in very many situations. Then we have the gate and the expander. So the threshold, as you turn this control, will simply set where that gate is going to close. So the gate just cuts all sound off at a certain point that you set. So you can see at plus 25, that's going to let very little signal through. You probably won't really hear anything coming through. As you lower it down, let's say you're dealing with a snare drum, maybe around somewhere between 0 and minus 10, you might just start to hear the snare drum. As you lower it, you'll start to let more things through, like maybe some extra cymbal bleed or perhaps the kick drum bleed or something like that. And then right down here, you'll be letting everything through. You've got normal and fast attack on this little switch here. This level meter here simply shows how much reduction you're getting. The depth is actually limiting how far it'll go. So let's say you brought it up to here and you're getting snare drum, but you decided you wanted a little bit of bleed in there, you just wanted to lessen it. You move the depth control. So for example, at 6, you're only going to be getting 6 decibels of reduction, regardless of what's happening with this threshold. Even if it was up here and you were gating everything, it would just be like turning the signal down essentially, because everything's below this threshold, therefore getting turned down by 6 decibels, or if you moved it to 9, it would be turned down by 9. So that's how the depth control works. Finally, you've got the release control. As you move the release control up, imagine this like a fader. You're actually controlling one of the channel faders, and it's how slow you would move the channel fader back to its original volume. So here you're going to be snapping that fader back super quick. Over here, 1.5 seconds, it'll slowly over 1.5 seconds recover to the original volume. What I find about the release control, just as a little tip, is do try the longer ones. Sometimes it can create a really nice sound. You tend to think, well, why wouldn't I want the sound to recover quickly? Try it. It can actually create a very natural and soft gating experience. Moving on to the compressor. This is a wonderful compressor. It does so much. You have the threshold control to set at what point the compressor starts to react. You have the ratio control, so that will simply be how aggressive the compressor is. You know, whether you're just doing gentle compression at 2:1 and essentially halving the dynamic range, or whether you're being really brutal and you can set this up all the way to infinity and make it a bit like a limiter. You also have hard and soft knee. So the difference between hard and soft knee, if you're not familiar with it, is soft knee gradually increases the compression ratio as the signal moves up. So it's a softer compression sound. Hard literally means no compression, no compression, no compression, and then just full. So if you're doing 10, the signal would have no compression, hits the threshold, immediately slices that sound off. There's no gradual, gentle slope leading into the compression. Then you have the release, which goes from 50 milliseconds to 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a really amazing release time for if you want to gently, broadly ride the volume of sections. So a good place for a really long release is, let's say you had a couple of compressors on your mix bus. You could add a third compressor set to 3-second release time, and then just dig into that a bit on something like quite a low ratio. And what that would do is it would mean as your chorus comes in, it's going to gently stop it being too loud, and then when the verse comes in, it gently will, relatively speaking, seem like the verse stays a bit louder, because you want your dynamic, but the intensity remains, but you get a more balanced level. And that's what I love about using long release times. You can think of them as balancing your big picture dynamics. So the next section is the new and old switch, and this changes it between feed forward and feed back compression. So it's really worth clicking that button to listen to the different tone and texture of the compressor. Then we have the EQ, and what we have is this blue control selects your frequency, which are all fixed, and you select the amount of gain increase or decrease at that particular frequency. The shape is fixed, but you do have the ability to change these top bands and bottom bands, so just this one here and this one here, from a shelf to a bell shape. So that gives you extra flexibility on those bands. These two here are bell-shaped curves, so they are always fixed at a particular shape. Then down the bottom here, we have pre-dynamics. So what that allows you to do is simply put this before the dynamics. At the moment, the way the channel strip flows is it goes the 212L, the 215L, 235L, 225L, and then finally 550L EQ. But if you want it before the dynamics, you hit that button and it'll pop it before the dynamics. The type button is fantastic because this can change it to this EQ. Again, you've got fixed frequencies, but on this one, we can move it in really small increments. So that's better if you want finer detail. I'll use this EQ on things like the mix bus and such like that. Then over here, we have dynamic sidechain. So this is exactly the same as the sidechain over here. And what that lets us do is shape the EQ so the compressor hears what our EQ shape is, but we don't. So if I press sidechain and I turned up 700 Hertz, I wouldn't hear any 700 Hertz change, but the compressor would. So that can be really great, again, for selectively asking the compressor to mostly listen to certain frequency ranges of an instrument. Again, it's not a multiband compressor, it still works on the entire signal, but its trigger just comes from where you choose to set the prominent frequency in the signal. And then finally, it's the on and off button. Lastly, over here, as I mentioned earlier, this is the output level, which you will see is changed by this fader. And then we simply have the side chain. So this is the classic side chain for, say, if this was a synthesizer and you wanted to side chain it from a kick drum, that's what that's for. So every time the kick drum hits, the compressor listens to the kick drum, but actually compresses the synthesizer, giving you that pumping effect. And then lastly, we have power on and power off. So that's quite a big tour of the API Vision channel strip. Let's actually listen to it in action. So I'm going to play this track. If you watched the video last time, you'll know the first thing I'm going to go and have a look at is the ukulele. Because there's nothing on this mix, it's just totally flat except for a little bit of reverb. I've sent some of these tracks through to a Capital Chambers reverb over here. Other than that, we're just going to freshly EQ this ukulele. We'll have a listen. I think the ukulele sounds like it's got a little bit too much mid-range in comparison to the track and maybe not enough air. So let's have a listen and we'll change that on the API Vision channel strip. Alrighty, so API Vision. What I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to hit my filters on. I'm going to make sure I don't have my sidechain engaged because that'll be a little bit of a challenge. And I'm going to just take some of the very low end out of the ukulele. I don't need anything beneath 50 Hertz, so I'm just going to roll it up to 50 Hertz as a starting point. Now let's go and find that mid-range frequency. To me, it feels like 500 Hertz is the place that I heard, and that matches what I heard as the problem in the track. Remember, what I'm not doing is just boosting this up to maximum and then scrolling through listening for if I don't like any of the frequencies. If I do it like that, I'll hate all of them because they all sound daft turned up to full like this. But I heard the problem. I heard the range in which I didn't want that frequency to be so prominent, and then I just looked for that same sound as I bounced around here. It feels like it's 500 hertz to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by simply turning it down by 2 decibels. I love working like this. Don't go too far because it's so easy to go too far. So just starting off with 2 decibels and see if that fixes the feeling I have. Let's have a listen. Alright, so curiously, I'm actually wondering if it's 700 hertz because as I'm taking 500 out, it's helping, but it's not quite where I need it to be. So let's try 700. I'm going to do a quick A and B. And again, I'm going to do a quick A and B on just the opening chord. Yep, that absolutely solved my problem. It was not 500 at all. It was actually 700 hertz, which was causing me the problem. So you can see I wasn't using the EQ to tell me where the problem was. I could hear it, so I had to find it and then pull it back with this EQ. I also want some top end on this, so I'm going to try and find some top end that I like the sound of. I am going to use a shelf, so it'll just raise everything above the frequency that I select. Let's just go and find it. Okay, excellent. So the next problem that I have with this ukulele is let's play the track, and similar to the last week's video, the second chord pattern that it strums in this part is a little bit too quiet. So I want to use this compressor to bring the balance between the opening chord, which is a little too loud, and the following chord, which is a little too quiet. I want to bring them closer together. Let's have a listen. Okay, switching the compressor on. Let's choose a slow attack initially because I want to let some of those transients through. And I'm going to keep the ratio somewhere around 4:1. That's probably some, between 3 and 5, somewhere around 4:1. And I'm going to select soft knee initially, so it's a more gentle compression. And I'm going to select 0.25 seconds or 250 milliseconds release time. I'm going to keep it on old as well. Let's have a listen. Okay, so the second chord is still a little quiet. Let's bring this up a little bit. Here we go. I still feel it's a little quiet, so I'm going to keep pushing. Let's push this a little further. Let's do a quick A-B. On first and then off. it's sounding much better with it on. But similarly to last time, what I feel is that I want a higher ratio because I kind of just want to capture that opening chord. The opening big strum is just a little bit louder than everything else. So really, I just want to capture that as much as I possibly can without going really brutish and just putting it on 20 to 1 or something. I want to try and leave a little bit of life in it. And I'm also just going to bring it to medium attack as well. So let's try that. Okay, quick A-B comparison. Well, that's much, much better. You can really hear the detail in that. That ukulele is now sitting in the mix. It doesn't disappear. You don't start to lose those chords. That is wonderful. So again, we had really similar results with this channel strip. Two completely different kinds of channel strip. The SSL 4KB and the API Vision channel strip. They're two really very different kind of channel strips. These, the SSL isn't fixed points on the EQ. This is. The SSL was pretty much to fix compressor. You've got a lot more control on this one. But you know what? The results, while slightly different, still got us a great sound in both situations, or at least at this stage of the mix. Everything in a mix, you do something else and then you come back and revisit something earlier. You build up a mix in stages, in little steps, going from one instrument to another and then back again. And slowly your mix starts to come together. So what else could we do on this mix? Let's have a listen. So the same thing we did last time. What I'm curious about is if I use my API Vision on the drum bus just to see if I can get a bit more snap. The SSL 4KB is a really snappy compressor, and I genuinely don't know how this one's going to respond to doing a similar thing. So let's just see. I'm going to put it on new for this, so the compressor's going to be set to new. I'm going to leave the release time somewhere around this midpoint, somewhere around maybe 300 milliseconds. I'm going to bring this down to a ratio of 2 initially, and so that's slow attack, hard knee, new style compression rather than old style, and then I'm going to bring the threshold down and see if we get the same kind of snap as we did from the SSL 4KB. Well, it's certainly got a different kind of feel, and I think I want to try giving it a little more. So I'm just going to bring this ratio control up here. Let's listen to this. Let's do a quick A and B. Here we go. On first. Now, one of the things that I really notice is that the drums get louder because this has got an auto gain feature in the compressor to try to help you out. But sometimes on some settings, that auto gain just simply makes it seem louder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compensate with this fader to make sure that really what we're trying to compare is the compression character and not just it getting louder. So let's turn this down and have another listen. Okay, you can really hear what the compressor's doing to the signal now. It's about level balanced as much as you can because, of course, we're reshaping the transients of that drum track. So now we can never really set the volume to a point where it's equal because we're now dealing with a totally differently shaped sound. It's not the same as if you're applying a reverb or something or putting a bit of distortion on something. Yes, those do change things, but the compressor really reshapes those transients. So you can only go so far with level matching. And that does include things like adding distortions or reverbs or anything. There's only so far you can go with the level match. You're just trying to get it to sound about the same volume to your ears. But it's really changed the character. Let's have another listen with it on first and then off. I'm just going to tweak the volume down just a little bit more. Let's have a listen. What's so interesting with that compressor is it now makes me want to turn the kick down a little bit. And this is exactly how mixing works. Now that we've done that, I like the result. I like the punchiness. The snare gets a little bit more attacky. It's a really lovely sound. But I think I need to turn down the kick a little bit. Let's listen again. Now let's do an A-B with this whole channel strip on those drums and see what difference the compression is making now that I've level matched, tweaked and changed the balance of my kick and snare. And of course, when we do the A-B, you're going to notice that different balance in the kick and snare when the compressor is off. Let's have a listen. Do you see how with the compression on, it feels more contained, it feels more controlled? There is now like a relationship between the kick and the snare. They sort of seem like they're somehow more glued together. They seem to be better mixed. And that is the wonderful thing about using compressors on bus channels, is you put all of the instruments that are going to it together more. And so that's where I would kind of start with this mix and then I would just continue across all the other tracks, making all these little changes, shaping up the mix little by little, until at one point you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't think there's anything wrong with this. I don't hear any funny frequencies. I'm not feeling that anything sticks out in an odd way. I'm feeling everything's controlled and I can hear all the parts. And you can do it all with channel strips, which is why I absolutely love them. They are uncomplicated, they solve the problem straight away, and if you need any other fancy tools, you can go and grab them. But these contain everything you need to make a professional record. If you would like to know more about mixing, please head over to my website, which is recordwithalex.com. And over there, I have a free mixing guide, a free 6-step mixing guide, which gives you a detailed but manageable insight into my whole mixing workflow, kind of boiled down to 6 easy to follow steps. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've got something out of this video. Please let me know in the comments what your thoughts on channel strips are, and I will see you on another video next week.